Okay, we can proceed.
Thanks,
Okay.
Corey.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your help.
Mr. Chairman, my comments may go over 3 minutes. Is that-
Okay,
um,
I've never known you to go less.
No, the city commission will cut you off in 2 minutes and 59 seconds. So
Well, this is
I
important.
have been done that. I have done that. And I appreciate your courtesy. We're making history today here. We're approving a firing range with no neighbors objecting to the firing range. First time in history. I wanted to go on the website that it has now happened. We are now in agreement that that firing range needs to be pointed south. No one in the world, except the planning board, or except the planning department right now, thinks that north is a good idea. I don't even think they think it's a good idea. I think that's a bargaining position that we're playing games with right now. We are all in agreement. We've sent a memorandum of understanding to the planning board, and I don't want to go into it because normally we don't go into settlement discussions until there's a full deal. And whatever Lonnie and Craig negotiated or to talk with the Millers about out at the site after I'd gone really shouldn't be a part of the discussion right now because we have had the opportunity to visit about since then. But the bottom line is that I think we need to be looking at these travel easements. And if I could have you go to the travel easement issue, that's what's before us. And the difficulty we've had, as you know, is that you're now deciding a planning board issue as a quasi judicial body rather than the county commissioners. Had you, a year ago when you bought the site, come to us and said, let's negotiate, we could have negotiated this in private and had some direct conversations. We've only been able to have communication with your staff right now, and I think theoretically they have not been able to communicate with you regarding any of the numbers that have been proposed. So maybe I'm proposing numbers for the first time in your knowledge, and so I guess to get this moving, we need to kind of talk about that. Could we have you put up the travel easement map again for us?
Yes.
Excuse me. Yeah, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's great. I'm not sure how GIS came up with the easement that exists between the Millers, which is the purple line, and the blue line. But I would hand to you the description of the easement that's been recorded with the easements that were created in 1995. And I haven't asked the surveyor to go out and survey these or to have Charles Wilson prepare us a detailed map of where this land is, but this kind of follows the conversation that Mr. Wells was talking about earlier. You can see the line that was agreed to is a straight line that goes from the pasture trail to the, excuse me, I'm sorry, goes from the pasture trail to the edge of the property, straight line through. So if you, I don't know how you come up with, all the this is about, let me say, 1,200 feet, and this is about 1,700 or 1,800 feet. So it's a significant increase, a significant inconvenience when you base the number of tight turns that you're making with heavy equipment. And okay. So that becomes a consideration. The Millers are suggesting that for the next 99 years, this easement is going to be in place, and that $100 a year for that 99 years is not a bad compensation for the inconvenience and stress of making those turns and using a less convenient easement. So at $9,900, That's what they're proposing. On 170 acres, that $9,900 is about, what, $50 an acre? $75 an acre. You pay $2,200 an acre for land, 2,200 an acre for, which is the equivalent of top pasture dollar in many places, for an abandoned rock quarry. I'm not disparaging the negotiating ability of the seller of that rock quarry. I think they did a great job. I don't know anybody else who would have paid that much for an abandoned rock quarry, but that deal was done. But the point I'm making is if you can spend $374,000 for the land itself, paying $10,000 for the travel easement to be modified or changed is a small, insignificant amount, especially on top of the $400,000 or $500,000 you're going to be spending improving that. So between, when you spend $800,000 to get to that project, spending another $10,000 to have the travel easement that allows you to shoot in the direction that everybody in the entire neighborhood believes is the right one, including your planning board who don't live in that neighborhood. That seems to me to be a small price to pay for community effort, community neighborhoods. We're using barnyard examples. I understand a sow's ear. This is a chicken and egg. We're here for you as an easement we're here before you as a use purpose before we really had the easements in place. That should have been done shortly after the purchase. But anyway, we're here. But that's the number we're looking at. Is we think and it's a reasonable number. You can decide whether it is or not. But out of $800,000, $10,000 is really insignificant. Now the planning board or Craig or Monty can say, well, we'll condemn it and we'll go to court and we'll prove that we're giving you the same access that you had before. You enter at point A and you come out at point B and you make a bunch of turns and you got to take it because it's even and we don't have to pay any money for it. I guess my view of property rights is a little different. If I've got a property right and I'm using it and I'm enjoying it, it works to me and it's fine, then for somebody to take it and say something else that is just as good and I shouldn't get any compensation for it at all, that doesn't fit in my sense of what property rights are about and what fairness is and what the role of government is in taking property and all of those things. So I don't want to inflame you any further by arguing that we're entitled to a bunch of stuff that we're not entitled to, but it just seems to me that this is such an insignificant thing that you're putting a firing range within a few hundred feet of their property. If I were putting an asphalt plant there, a special use and needing a special use, clearly that asphalt plant, that hog farm operation, whatever other use I was trying to put there that affected the value of my property, we'd be asking for a lot more than $10,000. And I think that by us acquiescing to that, not asking for any diminution of value of the entire real estate, which I think it will, being that close and that visible, and those are thoughts that I would have as to the fair compensation. The Mertzes are asking for $7,000 an acre, which is the commercial value of their land, and there's 3 acres there. They're also willing to take off several $1,000s at the $7,000 rate off of the request if they're allowed to run that 700-foot road down onto that easement. I don't know whether this is the appropriate place to get into negotiations on how much to spend and why we're spending it and how you guys are going to make that decision. I don't know if that decision has to be made before you approve the use. It's a confusing procedural dilemma we're in right now, but that's kind of where we're coming from.
Joe, and since it is from book 674, page 254 on the easement that you handed us, and GIS is incorrect, that really changes things quite a bit, because then you'd be going from this point up here to this corner, and that just makes that just a slight arc. And that simplifies it quite a bit. You don't have all those turns. So if you're correct, then we're not going to be changing that easement very much, because we're going to be eliminating all this down here and all these here jogs.
Well,
So I don't see that there's hardly any, there's insignificant additional cost warranted, because it's really not changing anything. It doesn't have the change in the 12 to 1,700 foot or anything. So I think if we go by this and we keep the shooting off to the southeast, to me, that looks like that would simplify it.
well, I'll tell you, you know, that's your opinion, and we'll let a judge decide whose opinion is accurate. I'm just trying to give you some guidance or give you some thoughts on how we might reach a compromise. And I think that the $10,000 is much cheaper than going to court or delaying this or any other expenses we had. And you can argue that's logical, and I can argue it's logical.
Well, I hadn't seen this
Judges
before, so that changes things, you know. And
Well, I think you know as well as I do, the topography of the ground out there would not allow you to go in a straight line. And
I mean, that's where the easement is.
we'd have to discuss that.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Any other comments? No one else? Well, there are no other comments, public comments. I close the public hearing. You guys have a question?
It seems like to me that it'd be far more sufficient at this point in time to go to the southeast, because that's where I remember us being at to begin with. In terms of easements and everything, willing to work out whatever we need to work out to try to get that to happen at this point in time. As has been mentioned, we've discussed this, what to do with this particular facility and site for well over a decade now. At some point in time, we need to make some progress and movement forward on getting it done, so they have that training, and it's for a critical service. So.
Well, if we go with the northeast, leave the easement where it is, some lawyer comes up with, well, that's not where it, by the record in the book, it's up here, and then we get involved in something again. I mean, I don't know if it's been the adverse possession length of time or not, because like I say, there's a great disparity where it's pictured on here and where Joe just handed me a legal document.
Yeah.
I guess it's legal. So at that point, while we're looking at the northeast shooting direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to make that other easement work.
And then, I mean, it's, I think just personally, once like Joe said, I'm speaking personally, if the easement was like they said, started up there and made that arc to the north so we could shoot southeast, I think it'd be to the advantage of Mertz and Miller to work together, because that's going to give him a short 700 foot access to his property. And I think that's what should occur. But right now, at some point, we need to settle on the special use for the property.
Right. That's what this is for, special use. So do you have any other comments on what you might do, or the motion for special use? Because that's what this is about.
There's no further comment from Miller or Mertz.
Well, let me come comments here.
Well,
Okay,
state the public hearing has been closed. You
Yes.
did close it.
yeah, I know, I closed the public
I
hearing.
thought Commissioner was inviting comments from Miller and Mertz.
Well, no, I asked for comments, public comments, and I received nothing. So I closed the public hearing.
He did at the end.
So, because I asked people if they wanted to talk before I did that. Additional.
I understand. I heard Commissioner Wells say if there are any other comments from the Millers or Mertzes, and that's what I was
I said
thinking.
there wasn't, excuse me.
There wasn't comments, he said.
There wasn't any comment at that time about getting together or doing anything.
So,
I might have been mistaken, Joe, but I didn't hear anybody during the public hearing talk about, well, let's work together or whatever on that, so.
No, I think that then I may have misrepresented everything we were saying. I said we were in agreement on this.
yes, yes.
The only thing we're in disagreement on is whether or not there ought to be any compensation.
No, it's special
Or-
use today. Today is it going to be special use? Then after that, we can get to that one.
Okay, if that's the case, but the problem with special use is that the special use you're talking about is conditioned, I think, upon the travel easements that you allow through the property. You can't have a special use that says I'm going to go with site A or site B without having a conclusion on where that travel easement's going to be. And I guess what I'd also hope that you would consider as a part of this special use is the covenants that the,
Excuse me, Joe. You closed the public hearing.
Right.
So unless you recognize Joe for further comment, which you're free to do,
Mhm.
then you're done
Yeah.
with that portion.
Go ahead and
It's
let,
up to
Yeah,
you.
you have,
I think procedurally they'd have to reopen it, but
Absolutely.
now that it's closed right now, I just want it to be clear for everyone in attendance what the motion states. Approve special use for an RCPD training facility with a south firing range orientation, provided the BOCC can reach acceptable terms with the MCMT for relocation of existing easements.
I didn't hear that, I didn't hear all that.
And
that's one of
And
them.
then there's another motion with the firing range orientating towards the northeast.
Yeah.
So
It's either gonna be south
it
or-
does have relocation of existing easement in both motions. Because you said that's part of the issue, and that is in both motions. I just want everyone to be clear that if they pass this motion and this resolution, that is what will be resolved.
so it's,
May I make additional comments?
okay, one time.
The discussions we've had at this point have included also some restrictive covenants that pertain to the future operation of the firing range, so it would make those covenants part of the.
Is
the
that in
landowner.
there too? I thought that was all part of that.
That is not in this
Okay,
motion.
not in the motion.
And I think that's been we've always discussed that in good faith, that those covenants would exist. Now, you can say those covenants will be a condition of the easement, and that will be open to negotiations when we negotiate the easements. But I wanted to not lose sight of that
Okay.
element.
Let me ask Clancy on that. Is that something that, or you
You have
guys
two
here?
motions in front of you right now. And I didn't hear you reopen the
We
comment
didn't.
for anything that was just said. So my suggestion would be, if there's gonna be one of those motions acted upon, that you do that. That's up to you, of course.
So
You're running this hearing.
I guess to be fair to them, if you feel that is something we want to do, to reopen this up, to talk about this.
something, I mean, I'm ready to make a motion or listen to more, that's up to
Well,
you
you
guys.
have a north direction and a south direction. So
Yeah.
in terms of trying to negotiate after a special use right now, but seeing fitting to me to pick the one that's gonna give us and everybody involved the best possible opportunity to come to that agreement, given the dynamics of the two motions that are laid out in front of us. That's probably what's up for discussion and or debate at this point.
Either way, Clancy, then if the way they're written, so if a negotiation comes out favorable, the planning board could come back and ask for a change.
You have a couple different options. in
Yeah,
mind.
so I just, to get off center, we need to do something, and I'm ready to make a motion, and they can get the negotiations underway, and we're not gonna start building today anyway, so.
One thing you need to be clear, I would suggest in any motion passage, are those acceptable, does there have to be agreement on the terms of those easements?
Yeah.
In order to proceed? You either, up to me, you either authorize the special use or you do not. I just don't.
Chairman, what's your,
Well, I'm
Ready for a motion or not?
authorizing the special use. Now, again, you're leaving your routes alone, or you can say, you know, because they have one of them is to the south and one of them is to the northeast.
well, but either way.
Either way.
Negotiate, so.
Well, my advice is, we can't build something with those easements in place. That's why we're here. So, our thought was that you make a decision on whether you want to pay compensation today or not. So we can get that resolved.
Well,
Otherwise we got to go with the northeast. We need to make a decision on which way we're going. And staff just didn't feel that we could recommend compensation in this case. But
Okay,
you have the ability
because
to,
I had a question on the compensation, we were trying to get a raw easement to come in, and they're willing to pay for compensation on something else.
well,
you know.
our advice is that we move the water
Yeah, let the
line
water
easement
go.
aside,
Okay.
set that aside, because that's something that Leon, for example, could
Yeah.
use the standard
Yeah.
process to
Okay.
negotiate on that. What we need to decide today is the travel easement.
I'm not
Okay,
open, since we're
They
crossing,
want
crossing the same
compensation.
property, I'm not open to compensation for, being held up for monetary gain where they're not losing if they were losing the easement, then they need to be compensated.
Just wanted to be clear, in this motion as proposed, there's nothing that addresses monetary compensation, so that'd have to be a separate motion if the board entertains that. No matter which,
That's the terms.
no matter which direction.
If you can come to acceptable terms. So if we're gonna go south today, then we need them to agree to that without compensation, so that we can make that decision.
Craig, is that correct?
And what is correct?
The motion as it stands, you've seen, it doesn't address monetary compensation at all. So Monty's saying they need to determine monetary compensation if they go south. I'm saying there's no motion or anything presented here that says they have to agree to that at this point.
In the actual motion, I just heard it, I haven't read it. Read it for me one more time.
If it's the south, move to approve special use for an RCPD training facility with a south firing range orientation, provided the BOCC can reach acceptable terms with the MCMT for relocation of existing easement.
And I guess
And then the second one,
That implies terms.
The other one's just north. The other one's just
Yeah.
north,
and
or north orientation.
to me, that authorizes the negotiations to try to resolve the easements.
okay,
So,
That's what I'm saying. It authorizes those negotiations at a later point in time. It doesn't have to be determined now, is what I'm saying.
Under that wording, I say that would be correct.
Okay,
Okay.
so be clear.
And
So that's what I was
to give Joe some comfort if that's possible. Obviously, negotiation concurs all aspects, so that would pick up any kind of covenant discussion you want to have.
okay, all right.
So,
Is that,
well,
Answer your question,
with
then?
with the northeast orientation, provided it cannot reach acceptable terms, and then we still may reach acceptable terms, so. I don't see that either one of those, all that is providing for the special use of the property.
Right.
For a firing range, is still open, we can still do, somebody can negotiate, so.
so which one do you want to do?
I'm been waiting to make a motion. so.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I move to approve, staff recommends the approval of the use for RCPD training facility with a northeast firing range orientation, provided the BOCC cannot reach acceptable terms with the MCMT for relocation of the existing easement.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I guess that means we're down to adjournment,
You
okay?
gentlemen to
Lunch.
sign this resolution.
I guess you guys can come back with,
So basically, we're back to square one.
the agreements then.
Is there any reason for negotiations since you're not needing our easement? What are we
Well,
negotiating?
if it's agreeable to move the thing,
Yeah.
then we can switch to the southeast. I mean, all we're doing is approving the conditional use of the property.
Yeah.
To the northeast.
Mhm.
So you-
Provided negotiation fail.
So if negotiations
Fail.
if negotiations result in an agreement, that the site would go to the southeast,
That could come back in front for us to make that motion.
so you then amend this
Mhm.
approval of a special use to go southeast.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
Are you there?
Yes. No,
Yeah.
yeah, they haven't
Where-
officially
where-
adjourned yet. No, they have not.
Had a question.
The board really needs to recognize speakers. Control the meeting.
When he addressed me, I responded.
Earlier, yeah.
Just
You
now.
sense walked away.
Did you have a question?
My question is the negotiating process. I mean, is there any consideration for monetary on travel easement?
Well, we can get there and go with that next time. In other words, all we did was special use of the land, okay?
So we're gonna come back to.
If
the
you,
commissioners.
if that is the concern now, yeah.
If the negotiations fail, then we'll go with the northeast.
Thank you, folks, for coming.
Well, basically, Bob needs to talk to Mason.
Yeah.
And say, hey, look, let's just do this, and then come back and shoot the other way. I mean,
Do we have anything else?
I don't have any other business, gentlemen.
Then
I don't
make
have
a motion,
anything.
we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, meeting is adjourned.
Okay, Corey.
Thank you, Corey, that was good.
Bonnie, who are we negotiating with?
That's a good question.
We don't know.